I'm Dr. Yende. Let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever stood up after a great massage and felt like your body was somehow moving differently? Lighter, looser, more coordinated. As if something had changed beyond the muscles themselves. Most people assume that's because the massage released a knot, or increased blood flow, or relaxed tight tissues. But modern neuroscience suggests something far more fascinating may be happening. What if deep tissue massage isn't just changing your muscles? What if it's changing your brain? Today we're exploring one of the most overlooked frontiers in longevity science, the neuroplasticity of touch. And why a skilled therapist may be doing far more than manipulating muscle. They may be helping your brain rewrite movement itself. For decades, massage therapy was viewed primarily as a mechanical intervention. The thinking was simple. A tight muscle gets loosened, blood flow improves, pain decreases, problem solved. But the more scientists study movement, pain, and aging, the more they realize something surprising. Your muscles don't control movement, your brain does. Every movement you perform begins inside the nervous system. Before a muscle contracts, the brain creates a prediction, a motor command, a movement strategy. And that strategy is based on information. The quality of movement depends on the quality of information reaching the brain. This is where deep tissue massage becomes incredibly interesting. When a therapist applies pressure to muscle, fascia, tendons, and connective tissue, thousands of sensory receptors become activated. These receptors immediately begin sending information toward the spinal cord and brain. The brain receives a flood of data: pressure, stretch, position, joint angle, muscle tension, temperature, movement potential. This is called proprioceptive information, and proprioception may be one of the most important systems in the human body, because proprioception is how your brain knows where your body is in space. Without it, movement becomes inaccurate, awkward, and eventually unsafe. Now, let's talk about aging. One of the reasons movement quality declines as we age isn't simply because muscles become weaker. The brain's movement maps also become less precise. Scientists sometimes refer to this as cortical smudging. Areas of the brain that once represented movement with incredible precision begin to lose clarity. The result? Compensation patterns, poor posture, reduced mobility, balance problems, increased risk of falls, and persistent pain. The body starts finding shortcuts. The brain starts using older, less efficient movement strategies. And over time, these strategies become habits. Here's where touch becomes fascinating. Every time deep mechanical pressure stimulates sensory receptors, the brain receives updated information. It's almost like receiving a software update. The nervous system suddenly realizes, wait a second, the shoulder can move farther than I thought. The hip isn't as restricted as I believed. The neck doesn't need as much protective tension. And immediately movement begins to change. Not because the tissue magically transformed, but because the brain updated its model of the body. This concept completely changes how we think about flexibility. Most people assume flexibility is determined by muscle length, but research increasingly suggests flexibility is largely controlled by the nervous system. Your brain determines what range of motion feels safe. When the brain feels threatened, it limits movement. When it feels safe, it allows movement. Deep tissue work may function as a negotiation with the nervous system, a conversation, a signal that says, this area is safe, you can let go. You can move differently now. And often the brain responds immediately. One fascinating area of research involves pain. For many years, scientists believed pain originated directly from damaged tissues. Today we know the reality is more complex. Pain is produced by the brain. That doesn't mean pain is imaginary. Far from it. Pain is real. But pain represents the brain's interpretation of incoming information. And that interpretation can change. When deep tissue massage floods the nervous system with sensory information, it may alter how the brain interprets a painful area. The threat level decreases. Protective muscle guarding decreases. Movement improves. Pain often decreases. Again, not because the therapist physically removed pain, but because the nervous system recalibrated. Now let's discuss one of the most exciting concepts in neuroscience: neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity simply means the brain can change. New connections form. Old connections weaken. Neural maps adapt. The aging brain remains plastic, not as plastic as a child's brain, but far more adaptable than scientists once believed. Every meaningful sensory experience has the potential to influence neuroplasticity. Movement does, exercise does, learning does, music does, meditation does, And increasingly, evidence suggests therapeutic touch may as well. The brain is constantly updating its internal model of the body, and touch becomes one of the inputs shaping that model. What makes this particularly important is the relationship between movement and longevity. The biggest threat to independence isn't necessarily disease, it's loss of mobility. When mobility declines, everything else begins to follow. Activity decreases, strength decreases, balance decreases, confidence decreases. Social interaction decreases. Health often declines rapidly. Protecting mobility is protecting independence. And protecting independence is protecting longevity. Now let's be scientifically careful. Deep tissue massage is not magic. It doesn't cure arthritis. It doesn't regenerate cartilage overnight. It doesn't reverse aging. But what it may do is optimize the nervous system's ability to use the body you currently have. And that's incredibly valuable. Because function matters. The ability to move matters. The ability to recover matters. The ability to remain active matters. What I find fascinating is that many people pursue longevity through supplements, wearables, biomarkers, laboratory tests, and all of those have value. But sometimes we overlook something much simpler. The nervous system needs information. Good information, accurate information, high-quality sensory input. And touch remains one of the most powerful sensory experiences available to humans. Long before modern medicine, long before pharmaceuticals, long before wearable technology. The human nervous system evolved through touch, and perhaps part of healthy aging involves maintaining that connection. So the next time you receive a deep tissue massage, remember, the therapist may not simply be working on your muscles. They may be influencing your brain, updating your movement maps, refining proprioception, reducing threat signals, improving mobility, and encouraging neuroplasticity. Not through chemicals, not through surgery, but through information. And in neuroscience, information changes everything. I'm Dr. Yende. This is OXYZEN Health Intelligence, and I'll see you in the next episode. Before you go, let me ask you, have you ever noticed immediate improvements in movement, posture, flexibility, or pain after a massage? Tell us about your experience in the comments below.